collectively, we probably spent $100,000.
Oh.
And that's airfare for everybody. Hotel, well, we stay at college dorms, but some of the grandparents stayed at hotels. Accommodations, let's just say. And then transportation within the country. Oh yeah, by the way, some food and of course for the adults, a couple of pints. But collectively about $100,000.
Hello and welcome to episode 28 of the BandWagon podcast for the week of September 2nd, 2024. On this edition of the program, news and notes from the band world, including new Macy's Parade band announcements, a report from preseason camp, I've got an apology of sorts, and trust me, during this week's trio conversation, you will learn stuff. I'm your host, Rob Hammerton. Hello, dear listener. The centerpiece of these podcast episodes famously is the trio section, in which I have a conversation with a band or band-adjacent person. Now, I'm discovering that all these interviews I've recorded since March, they're like your children. You love them all. Could be for different reasons, they're not all perfect, but every one of them has something wonderful about them, and sometimes it's something you never saw coming. Something you never imagined, even though you thought you had a pretty good idea of what they had in them. This week's is no different, and very different. You'll see what I mean when we get there. For now, find your gauntlets and spats, if you have such things, and away we go. Let's play the first strain. In this episode's first strain, news and notes from the band world. Dateline, Indiana, Pennsylvania. Indiana University of Pennsylvania has named Cassidy Nalepa to serve as interim director of The Legend, the IUP marching band, and as interim associate director of bands at IUP. Most recently, she was a graduate assistant for bands at Ball State University while completing doctoral studies in conducting and music education. She had previously earned a master's degree in arts administration from Drexel University and a master's degree in conducting from Westchester University. Nalepa, a 2003 IUP music education graduate, had also served on the faculty of Northwest State Community College, as director of music programs at Defiance College, and as a public school band director for several Pennsylvania school districts. Her arts administration experience has included work with the Special Music School and the Lucy Moses School at Kaufman Music Center in New York City. In July, IUP's previous associate director of bands, Dr. Zach Cheever, departed to assume a similar position at his alma mater, Austin Peay University. Dateline, New York, New York. The Macy's Thanksgiving Parade organization has announced its 9 participating bands for the 2025 edition of the event. Those bands include the Alcorn State University Sounds of Dynamite from Alcorn, Mississippi, Banda de Música La Primavera from Santiago, Panama, the Catawba Ridge High School Marching Band from Fort Mill, South Carolina, Damien Spartan Regiment from Laverne, California, the L.D. Bell Blue Raider Band from Hearst, Texas, the Spartans Drum and Bugle Corps from Nashua, New Hampshire, the Temple University Diamond Marching Band from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the NYPD Marching Band from New York City, and the Macy's Great American Marching Band. The 2025 parade will be the 99th annual. Approximately 100 bands submitted applications to take part. And that's news and notes from the band world for this week. If you have a news item you think should be included in this segment, send me a link via email to heybandwagon@yahoo.com. On the other side of this break, we're going back to band camp. This is BandWagon. Okay, let's pick it up at the second strain. In this week's second strain, at the top of the episode, I said there would be a report from preseason camp. And there indeed will be. Here it is. Last Thursday morning, I took a run out west to check out the local Minuteman Band as it prepared for its home football opener, which was Saturday. And don't get me started about the first football game of the season happening in late August. It's absurd, and I do have my own story about that subtopic, which I'll get to down the road. But I figured I might talk to a person or two about how it was all going. I imagined maybe offering a few sly, spoiler-free hints to you all about what my alma mater band is up to. But instead, I found myself taking a moment to step back and look at what was going on through a more wide-angle lens, metaphorically. I appreciated what was going on from a number of standpoints. In terms of the musical and visual output of the group, in terms of how, well, band alumni always, in their heart of hearts, want to come back and see their old band and think, yep, they're better than we were. Or at the very least, we don't want to think, they've backslid. I looked at it in terms of how great an organization it is for my number one nephew to have joined, because, yep, 40 years after I took part in my freshman year band camp rehearsing on that intramural athletic field, he was taking part in his on that exact same field. And I took note once again of what an incredible ability Minuteman Band Director Tim Anderson has for making sure the current so-called baby band, the undergraduates, are aware of their present and future connections to their band alumni family. He didn't have to make that kind of a big deal about me standing down there on the sideline, and it's not the first time he's done that, and let's remain humble where possible. Although he did plug this podcast pretty hard over the PA system, so I really can't complain. But the wide-angle lens through which I was watching the rehearsal that I do want to talk about a bit here is one that nobody who ever did band will be the least bit surprised about, whether marching or seated, school or community, no matter where and no matter what style. It's this. Very simply, artificial intelligence, AI, will never, ever be able to replicate the band experience in rehearsal or performance. In the first place, AI will probably manage to give bandos hands with 6 fingers and other silly, inexplicable mistakes like that. But more importantly, and I'll make this quick, since you all know the details, you all understand the specifics of all the things AI will never be able to come up with when you ask it, "Hey Siri," or whomever, "create an image of a band in rehearsal." I'm confident that AI will never be able to create or reproduce the spontaneity of the in-jokes, the sheer visceral impact of brass, woodwinds, and percussion all hitting that dot and that musical impact in one instant. The genuine, unironic verbal rooting for the director to successfully pull that bucket full of supplies all the way up from the ground to his location up at the top of the scissor lift by the attached rope. The unison answer, "Hey what?" to the question, "Hey band." And in this case, the spirit, the good cheer, the joy of hundreds of collegiate band members spending a morning not thinking about writing papers or cleaning their dorm rooms or meeting with professors or getting to their part-time jobs on time, but just spending an August morning, an August day, a whole August week, doing one thing and one thing only: band. In temperatures that were, last Thursday anyway, blissfully much cooler than 88 degrees. There was sweat, there was sunblock, there were heavy instruments. Friends, there was a baritone sax section. Talk to me about this later. And there were choreography movements to learn, drill to learn, music to learn, but there was palpable delight. And not just from me. AI cannot do that. And on the other side of this grand pause that we'll take now, Schenectady, New York. Hello.
Presenting drum majors, Rob Hamilton, Heidi Sarver, and I can't remember who else was back those
Chris
days.
Gardner.
Chris Gardner. Nice sound, really nice sound.
Okay, let's modulate and get into the trio section. This week in the trio section, I'm pleased to be joined by someone who, among other things, led a group that did quite well at World Championships, but not the ones at Lucas Oil Stadium. And if you haven't, for some reason, seen this episode's cover artwork, then you are still spoiler-free, and this is going to be an extra layer of fun. And for me, my extra layer of fun is that I'm just meeting my guest for the very first time, and that's always exciting. Please help me welcome to the program, MAUREEN CONNOR. Hello, MAUREEN.
Yay, hey, howdy, how's it going, Rob?
I'm well, and I'm thankful that you came on and did this. I feel like I set up the probably main topic of our conversation just well enough to give nothing major away whatsoever, and we'll dig into that promptly. But first, let me begin with some of my standard opening blast questions so my listenership can get a sense of who you are. So first question is, what's your primary instrument?
Well, today it's the bagpipes, the Great Highland Bagpipes. And it has been since 1985-86.
So my follow-up question, because this is starting out life as kind of a standard wind band podcast project, what is your secondary instrument?
Do you want to know the origin story?
Sure.
Yeah, okay. So when I was a little kid, I started off on flute in the music, band program, and played flute for many years, and then later discovered that I was languishing at the end of the second flute section and thought, oh, there's got to be more out there, and learned the string bass and electric bass, and I played in stage band in high school. And then I was always fascinated by what's the bigger world out there, and became the drum major of the marching band when I was in high school. And one summer I heard about this drum major academy workshop that they had, but I had to work that summer, so I never got to go.
Huh.
But when I applied to college, I of course wanted to be in a college that had a marching band, and UMass was the obvious solution. And my first year there, since I hadn't played flute in a while, and I wasn't going to play flute in a marching band, no offense to the flute players, I joined the color guard section, which was the worst thing for me ever because I wasn't playing a musical instrument. And then the following year, I learned the tenor sax, which in the marching band has a lot of long tones. And back in the day, we didn't have to memorize we still had the music lyres. Mm-hmm. I just dated myself. So that's what I did. And I was in love with marching band. And after college, I didn't do anything for a couple of years, went into the world of work. One day, I like to say it was the last day I was ever bored. I read the entire Berkshire Eagle newspaper from Pittsfield, literally down to the classified legal notices, obituaries, and saw this little tiny ad that said pipe band available for hire, teach lessons too. And I raced to the phone, and that's how I got connected with Nancy Tunnicliffe. She lives in Lanesboro, Mass, and that's how I got connected with her. And knock on wood, I was very fortunate to have a really excellent musician teaching people how to play the bagpipes. So that was how I got connected with the bagpipes.
Every activity in the world is music, sports, the law, arts and crafts, whatever, has its own set of stupid, obvious questions that to the participants are stupid, obvious questions, and to the outside world are I'm learning something new. So I'm going to be your I'm learning something new. Okay. For sure. Briefly before that, because I feel like even though I did my homework, I didn't do enough of my homework. Is there a list of bands that you've been active with in your life?
Pipe bands, yes. So I started out in the Berkshire Highlanders from Pittsfield, Mass. And then I wanted to play in a more challenging band. So I played with the Schenectady Pipe Band for a couple of years in Schenectady, New York, where I live now. When I moved, I figured I had a couple of options, and I figured at the time I might as well be close to band practice. So that's kind of how deep it goes. So 30 plus years later, I'm still in Schenectady, but I also played with the Manchester Pipe Band out of Connecticut. And then for many years, the Orrin Moore Pipe Band, which was a very high level pipe band competing in what we call grade 2 and then eventually grade 1. While this was all going on, I got involved in teaching the Scotia Glenville Pipe Band. And this group started in the school district, Scotia Glenville, which is right near Schenectady, New York, and they started a club that became a little bit more of a band, and they wanted to do something, and there was a position open for instructor, and that's how I got involved in the group. So I've been with Scotia Glenville, which became, the name just changed in 2016 to Capital District Youth Pipe Band, because we haven't been part of the school district for decades. It grew way beyond that, and I kind of pushed it beyond that as well.
I had seen two different names of bands, and they sounded like they were very, very similar. It turns out they were very exceptionally similar.
Yeah. So our nonprofit head thing still says Scotia Glenville, but we're the Capital District Youth Pipe Band.
So from flute to string bass to tenor sax to the bagpipes to you are now the head of the setup at Capital District, are you not?
Yep. We don't really call ourselves by traditional band names, but I use the term director because that's recognizable to the outside world.
Sure.
But within the piping community, I would be referred to as the pipe major or the instructor.
Which does lead me to some of my stupid, obvious questions. Calling oneself the director, yes, it makes clear to us newbies what's going on. Is there a standard pipe band setup? Are there different sorts of pipes and specific drums? And with the understanding that in the late 1800s, early 1900s, the British military band's standardized instrumentation setup was put together because it had to be, because there was disaster otherwise.
Yeah.
Has there been a similar movement in the pipe band activity?
Absolutely.
Educate me.
Yeah, it actually, the timeline that you're talking about is very similar. You know, historically, you would have pipers within the Scottish regiments, and they actually only paid the drummers back in the day, and pipers were paid privately out of officers' stipends and their pay. As you go through the 1800s, more pipers get involved, and then the whole thing with standardization of the music and the scores happens. The format of a pipe band is the pipe major is the leader of the band. The drum major, usually a guy out front with the big hat and the mace, they're just leading the band on parade. Unfortunately, today, most drum majors are ceremonial.
Hood ornaments, yeah.
Ornamental, and so within the pipe band, you'll have a pipe section of, say, 10 to 20 pipers. And then you'll have in the drum corps, you'll have the line of snares, and then tenors, which would be the marching band equivalent of the various different pitches in the quads, and then a bass drummer. On parade, they march in a formation of pipers in the front, bass drummer midsection, and then finishing up with the snare section. In competition and performance, it tends to be in a circle with the bass drummer in the center. Don't even ask about the circle. It's a controversial thing. It's traditional. It's not very audience friendly, but it's kind of what we do.
Which explains some of the photographs that I have seen. Okay, good.
Yeah. Yeah. So you'll see more bands these days will form what we call concert formation when we're playing in a concert. And that's the arc with the pipe major, the leader in the center, a traditional band setting. And it's interesting because it changes how the band sounds, it changes how the band projects into the audience. But pipe bands are not that far ahead with regard to those kind of things.
This is going to be an analogy which might be tortured, but also might work. In the military, my understanding is that passenger seats on aircraft face backward in the interest of helping the personnel deal with deceleration and such. But commercial airliners have seats facing forward because that's what people expect. They expect to travel facing their destination just like in cars. So it's audience expectation, it's general effect that is driving that. Maybe that analogy works. So that's one possible thing. On top of which, I'm a church musician, and so therefore there's the question of tradition versus let's do anything new and everybody has a heart attack.
Right. Oh, yeah.
So therefore, if I go to see a pipe band competition, now I don't ask an idiot question out loud. At least one, anyway.
Yeah. And where the circle came from, I have no idea. And The interesting thing is the sound quality, what you hear as a musician in the circle is so different from what you hear outside the circle. Huh. It's a very bizarre thing, and unfortunately, we'll be stuck with it for a while.
It occurs to me to ask, because brass and woodwinds are different in this way, in terms of sound projection. Do bagpipes send their sound every which way like woodwinds?
Sort of. Oh. So you have, the ultimate goal in that circle is you have the circle, and all the pipers are facing their chanters, which is the melody, towards the bass drum. And then you have the drones on top. And so, in a perfect setting, you'd have the pipes all facing towards the center and the sound going up, and then the drone sound going up and out, and then it all projecting out. From a actual sound projection perspective, the circle is just really terrible. It's nonsensical. And so pipers try to do their best. Drummers I know they tilt their drums in a certain way so that the drumming judge, which is behind the drum corps, can best hear the drummers. But it's all, from a person who's been in marching band, it makes no sense whatsoever. But this is what they do.
But if I had talked to someone who was strictly a bagpipe person and did not have the experience of the traditional wind band, what we understand as the traditional wind band performance, it might not occur to them to say that.
They don't know. Pipers don't know. If you've been in marching band, the classic finale, the whole wind section, marching from one end to the other to face the home stands, tilt the brass up, project to the top of the stands, that's a typical thing. But when you have groups that come indoors and then do arenas, well, they have to change how they project up, not up here, adjust how loud they play. There's big adjustments that have to take place from a football stadium to an arena to a stage. But pipers, they just do what they do. And there are questions, there are definitely individuals and organizations that push the envelope, and the higher level bands, the week of the World Pipe Band Championships, there's a festival called Piping Live, and one of the top level grade 1 bands will perform a concert to the wider audience. And so the stage shows have very much evolved in terms of instrumentation, where the setup is, how the setup is, where you put the drummers, where you put the pipers. That's definitely evolved over the last 25, 30 years.
75 questions just popped in my head, and we only have this much amount of time. No. But I think the one I want to go with has to do with, you talked about the World Pipe Band Championships, and yes, my friends, there is such a thing, and that's what I was trying to obfuscate at the beginning of this so as to maintain a certain air of spoilerism. And your group went, let's put it this way, it was not held in upstate New York.
No, it wasn't. The World Pipe Band Championships is held in Glasgow, Scotland. Usually the date is always the same as the DCI Championships, so I have never been to a DCI Championships, unfortunately, for that reason. But it's held in Glasgow. This year there were over 200 pipe bands, 40,000 spectators, 5,000 to 7,000 bandsmen. It's an unbelievable day. Here in the Northeast, we have quite a few pipe bands, so when we go to our local competitions, or even up to Canada, to Maxville, which is called the North American Pipe Band Championships, they get quite a large field of entries, but it's still nothing like the Worlds. In Scotland, there are a series of 5 championships that lead up to the World Pipe Band Championships, and the Worlds is the biggest one.
Yeah, I was going to ask, how in the world, pun intended, I suppose, organizations from North America get to go to Scotland?
Well, it's an open system, so there are not qualifiers. You just say, I want to go. You register your band, you pay your dues, you pay the entry fee, you get to go. Now, having said that, bands that make the journey, organizationally, it becomes a big deal because they know we're going to Scotland. There are good bands. There are lots of bands. And so the sheer numbers forces an organization to really work hard and improve to play the best they absolutely can on the day. So it becomes a process. Very few bands go to the Worlds just to go to the Worlds.
Just for the heck of it.
I mean, some do, but it's the sheer numbers will tear away any illusions of what it's all about. And when I say when we talk about when we initially discuss going to the Worlds, I always say to the parents and the kids, we are not going to Scotland. We are going to the World Pipe Band Championships that happens to be held in Scotland. So if you want to go around Scotland,
book your own trip, yeah.
Do it afterwards.
So I was imagining that it might have been something akin to the Little League World Series has an international contingent, but they've got to play through a little playoff system of their own, and it's nothing.
Correct.
Like that, huh?
It's not like that. It's not like that. But there are, in many of the divisions, there are qualifying rounds. So because there's so many, they have it broken into heats, and so you have to get through. You have to be able to get through the heats to be able to then play in the finals. But that's numbers based. It depends on certain divisions have more numbers than others.
So how many, on average, bands go to the World Championships from North America?
Probably across all the divisions, there were probably close to 20 this year. And actually probably more than that, because I'd have to look at the program. They'll only identify where you come from if you come from out with the United Kingdom. And then in the name of the band, they don't always have next to it where you come from. So I'd have to go through and count, but I would say a good 25 to 30 from North America total, all the grades. And then there's bands from Australia, New Zealand, all over Europe, the Middle East. There's a band from Oman that goes regularly, and they have, through these trips and through their education system, it's a military band and they receive instruction and training and guidance. They've improved tremendously over the years and are in the prize list now.
I'm imagining all the groups coming from here, but also from all kinds of different parts of the world. Let's be blunt, that has to be expensive.
Absolutely. So what I say is our trip, and it depends because we go as a youth band and we have parents and families. And this year we had no repeats from our previous trips. So entire families came. So collectively, we probably spent $100,000.
Oh. And
that's airfare for everybody. Hotel, well, we stay at college dorms, but some of the grandparents stayed at hotels. Accommodations, let's just say. And then transportation within the country. Oh yeah, by the way, some food and of course for the adults, a couple of pints. But for, so collectively about $100,000. One of the bands, the Scotch College Pipe Band from Melbourne, Australia, they brought two bands. They were very large this year. I don't know how many adults were with them, but they were in the UK. They were in Scotland for a good solid couple of weeks. And they said they spent 265,000 Australian dollars. So it's a costly undertaking. For the band members, the band pays for their accommodations and transportation in Scotland. So when we fundraise, that's what we're fundraising for. Band members are expected to pay their own airfare and then food when they're there. So we take care of them when they get there. It's a big financial undertaking. So any organization that wants to do this has to take the trip very seriously right from the start.
So the size of the organization will impact that. Are the different competing divisions laid out by band size? How are they structured?
The grading system, there's two things going on. One is the actual number grades. Grade 1 is the top, then grade 2, 3, 4, and in the US and Canada, there is a grade 5. I've always equated the grade 1 bands as the top professional orchestras, the equivalent of the New York Philharmonica and the Boston BSO, and the grade 2 bands are the equivalent of exceptional university programs.
Sure.
And then the grade 3s are sort of regular college programs, maybe exceptional high school programs. Grade 4 is your high school program. And then for any of you pipers out there who are listening to this conversation, what I'm about to say is highly controversial and will affect your ego, but a grade 5 band is the equivalent of a middle school band. You know, people have learned as adults primarily, which in the US there's a lot of that, and that's where they're at. They're playing, you know, simple melodies, simple embellishments, you know, pretty basic. So that's the grading level. The juvenile division is the term the Scottish use for under 18.
Okay.
So there are 3 separate categories. One is just juvenile, and those bands over the last, say, 20 years can be the equivalent of grade 2 bands. They are excellent. Then you have novice A, which probably is about the equivalent of a grade 3 band, and then novice B, which is very big division because you have the beginner levels up to the next level. So novice B is going to be the equivalent of the middle and high school bands. So it's like a high school band equivalent. Okay. And it is age regulated. So you cannot be in the band if you turn 18 before November 1st of the prior year. So this year we had 2 18-year-olds in the band, but they didn't turn 18 until after November 1st. So they were allowed to go.
They got grandfathered through the age out process.
Yeah. And then the music requirements, the playing requirements. In novice B, it is 4 2-parted, 2/4 marches, and there is a prescribed list that you select from, which has expanded over the years, thankfully. So it's pretty diverse because the grade 4 bands as well as the novice bands have to pick from this list. The 4 A's and the novice A's play a march, strathspey, and reel. So the 2/4 march is the standard. A lot of them are song tune based, but others are just written for that idiom. And then strathspeys and reels are dance tunes. So you're doing basically your fundamentals. And then the juvenile, which is grade 3/2 equivalent, they then play the medleys. Jigs, reels, slow airs, hornpipes, various styles of tunes that they put together in a selection.
Dear listener, if you feel like you're having to make a diagram while this is going, don't worry, so am I. Give me a moment or several moments or a day.
Yeah.
So when you go into competition, okay, here's another idiot question. It may or may not be an idiot question. Are there particular things that the judges are looking for? Absolutely.
The top thing that they're looking for is, I'll use the term, the tonal and temporal integration. So the goal of a pipe band is unison. You have 5, 10, 15, 20 pipers. Does it sound like all the pipers are playing the same thing at the same time? And that's what you're looking for. And then from there, it is integration of the phrasing. I use the term beat definition. Are you playing on the beat consistently and accurately? The quality and unison of the embellishments. The embellishments are what makes Scottish music different from other bagpipe music. And we have a set of complicated, I'll use the term rudiments because they are in a way kind of like drumming rudiments, but they have a specific rhythmic quality. They go with certain tones on the scale, and then our goal is to get to play them together at the same time. So you're taking time and you're trying to put it all together, and then you're taking tone and trying to put all that together.
I'm hearing about the concept of playing in unison, and in some areas of music, you would look at that and say, well, that is your bare minimum basic, is it not? But in the bagpipe world, is there standard manufacturing for bagpipes, or is every instrument kind of individual so that it makes it harder to make a unison? I don't want to put this in a way that's insulting to the bagpipers because they'll all come for me.
No, there's I would say there is somewhat of a standardization, and tuning of our instrument has changed over the last like 30, 40 years. Tuning as in the pitch.
Yeah.
Pitch has risen because we haven't put a cap on it that orchestras put a cap on a couple hundred years ago. 440 is the standard.
Yes.
Well, we haven't gotten there yet. There are modifications, but in a band, it is imperative that you have the same chanters, the melody part, that you have the same reeds, the same reed maker. Now, you don't have to do that, but your life has just been made.
But it helps.
It geometrically more difficult trying to get everything set. If you have a standardized manufacturer of chanters, which there are different makers out there, but you go with one or the other. And then the drones all have, certain makers have different qualities, and then drones and drone reeds, how you're trying to define that part of the sound can determine what drone reeds you have. Most bands would not ever say to a piper, you have to play this model of bagpipe. They might encourage you, or if you have a set that's harder to be stable, they might recommend that you get a different set, but they don't say you have to have this set of drones. Because when you're buying bagpipes, that's what you're buying. The chanter, the melodic part, is disposable. That over time wears out over time. Well, the plastic ones don't really, but that's a whole nother story. Probably not for this. That's a deeper question.
And what kind of panic arose when plastic got involved?
Oh God, and it changed things. And now they're all playing plastic now because it's easier to deal with. It doesn't change. With bagpipes, what we're going for, we're shooting to have the best possible sound. Build, warm up. Tune, perform. In Scotland, you have cold and damp.
I was going to say, when a weather front comes through.
You're fighting those conditions, and wood is a variable that changes and plastic doesn't.
Oh, to my clarinet friends.
Yeah, a lot of the higher level bands, though, now are, there was a big surge to try all the synthetic materials, and now it's come back. So the top level bands are all playing hide bags, sheepskin or cowhide bags, and they're playing cane drone reeds, which if you play them regularly, they're fine. But at the lower level bands, the synthetics have raised the level of the average player so much so that it's just easier to deal with. Teaching a youth band and trying to teach them how to do their maintenance themselves and be able to, we're just going to play the synthetic drone reeds because we are going to get 100% better sound, 500% times easier.
I can only imagine the variables that you are forcing not to change. Okay.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Okay, the sound, dear listener, that you may be hearing is not necessarily my head exploding, but all of the little popcorn sound effects of, this question and that question and this question, and I want to know more about that, because I think people may be interested. I feel like we could do a part 2 on this one.
Sure.
Hold that thought, everybody. I'm working on it. I am working on it in my head. Let me offer some of the standard questions that I ask to wrap up some of these recordings. These are questions that don't necessarily have their answers on a person's resume, but I think they're fun. And the first question is, what's one of your favorite pieces of band music that you've played, either outdoors or indoors? And I am not going to limit this to the wind band world because that would be horrible.
Oh gosh, there's so many tunes. There's a tune, Duncan Johnston, which was an opener that we played in the Oranmore Pipe Band for a couple of years. That has a nice driving forward momentum. So it's a great opener tune that you march into the circle. So that tune, Duncan Johnston, was always a favorite of mine. I could sing it for you, but you don't want to hear me sing.
I'll move to the diametric opposite question, which is if there a piece of band music that you have never played but you would like to.
I don't have a specific tune name in mind, but probably a piece that would be with a concert band or an orchestra, or, I've done a few of those things in the past, but not anything on a big scale. So something that's more with other musicians, play a B flat chanter. Oh my gosh.
Got it.
Yeah.
Is there a band that you would love to perform with that you haven't because you're not the right age or you're not in the right place or you don't live in the right time in history?
Oh, I would love to play with the Inverarian District Pipe Band.
I've heard of them.
They just won their 3rd World Pipe Band Championships.
Maybe that's why.
I don't know if I was ever good enough to make them, and I'm definitely way too old now, but Stuart Little, the pipe major, and Stephen McWhirter, the lead drummer, have just amazing musical sense, and I just like how they do their arrangements, and they're not afraid to push the envelope. It's a little bit of a sidetrack here, but pipe band medleys have evolved dramatically over the last 40 years, and they started off with just a march, a strathspey, a reel, a hornpipe, a jig, and it was just straight up. And now they're getting into doing things that you didn't know a bagpipe could do. And so there are creative uses of layering. We as pipe band people have become way better storytellers, because that's what we're doing. We're telling a story in miniature in 3 to 5 minutes. So they're using various different hooks and techniques, changing the instrumentation, or not the instrumentation, but the numbers to affect a volume change, which you don't change the volume on the bagpipes. It is what it is.
Yeah.
But you can change numbers and what notes they're playing, and you can do reprieves, and you can take the opening melody and then you can reintroduce it underneath the melody of the slow air as a harmonic line, and then bring it back into the end when the reels are playing, but you can tie back the slow air melody, and you can do all these various different mashups, so to speak. Anyway, there's another band actually that I would just die to play with, and that band is called Cap Caval, and they're a Bagad. And if you think what we're doing is interesting, look up Cap Caval. They just won their umpteenth Breton Bagad Championship, and they are to die for. And what Bagads do is what we do times a million.
Once again, this is what show notes are for, everybody.
That's an amazing world, the Breton Bagad, because they do more instrumentation. They don't limit themselves to unison of instrumentation. They do call and response between the bombards and the bagpipes, and then they've got what we would call the pit in marching band, full of God knows whatever, clarinet, steel drums, drum kits, all kinds of blah, who knows, every band is different. And then they also have a drum line, a snare line, and bass drums. That's a world to explore. That's very interesting.
The sound that you're hearing is my arranger brain exploding now.
Yeah, oh yeah. And Cap Caval is very creative with what they do.
Have you got a favorite band story that you can tell?
Oh God. Band stories, there's always the ones that you can't tell.
Indeed. And we therefore have not told them here. It's a family podcast, everybody.
Right. I don't think I have a favorite one. I'll be that boring person.
Well, I so appreciate you joining me for this today. This particular corner of the wind band world has been obliquely referenced a couple times on this podcast, but not nearly in so much detail. And I'm hoping that more people than just me are now going to race to their local internet, YouTube, whatever, and go down this little rabbit hole. Is there somewhere online where people can follow you or your band?
Absolutely. On Facebook, we are the Capital District Youth Pipe Band. And we do have a website, cdyouthpipeband.com. That's very much a formal, typical website, but Facebook is where you would follow us.
Well, one of my major successes from this conversation, aside from having you on to talk about the topic at hand, was that I didn't make any attempts at Scottish aphorisms or anything. I feel like I'm wise enough not to be that guy. Pipe band leader Maureen Connor, thank you so much for taking time for this conversation. I learned stuff, and I super appreciate your generosity.
Oh, my pleasure, Rob. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you, and haste you back. Almost made it all the way without trying to be a Scot. More BandWagon in a moment. Here comes the dogfight. In this week's dogfight, as I mentioned in this episode's open, I have a tiny apology to make. What I'm talking about is not really a sin of omission, even though there are a couple of groups that I haven't mentioned almost at all so far in the BandWagon era. They've been on my mind, and in my content calendar, the little document wherein I park all my ideas for topics and segments and such, in a desperate bid to stay organized and properly prepared to assemble an episode for any given week between here and, say, early October, which is another little tiny peek behind the scenes. Start thought, if you fail to plan, plan to fail. But back to the dogfight topic, it certainly seemed to a podcast listener that cannot read my mind as if I have indeed failed to mention a couple of bands that have played a rather significant role in my life's band experience. Admittedly, you have heard nearly endlessly about the Marching Minutemen over there in the Pioneer Valley. That is kind of unavoidable for various reasons. But, and please do pardon the next few moments, which will sound a bit like I'm just reading my resume and hoping you'll go ooh ooh, I got to arrange music for the Fightin' Blue Hen Marching Band for the better part of 3 decades, and to the best of my knowledge, there's one tune that I wrote for that Delaware band that is still going to be in use, even with a new director. Split seconds before I was recruited for that role, back in 1995, I had no idea that it was going to become not just a professional feather in the cap, but a source of grand memories and great friends, even though I only got to about 1 Delaware rehearsal and 1 home football game a year on average. I taught music for 12 years in the Uxbridge, Massachusetts public schools, 9 of those years at the high school, wherein we made lovely and curious music with a music program that was the epitome of the phrase small but mighty. And I've been invited to a couple of my former students' weddings and other life events over the years, and what a thrill that can be. For 4 years, in the middle of that time in Uxbridge, and please don't ask me how I made this work, I had the pleasure of directing the athletic bands at the College of the Holy Cross, and who the heck can say that they found a college band job across town from where they lived? Dang few, but me. For 6 years, I had the pleasure of being associated in various capacities with the Central Connecticut State University Blue Devil Marching Band, an outfit that I unofficially nicknamed the fastest marching band in New England, and, well, let's just say that pretty quickly it got to feeling like home. In fact, they all did. Funny how band environments will do that. So, as much time as I've spent singing the praises of my alma mater, the Mighty Minuteman Marching Band, and the university that I took some classes at, just enough to get my journalism degree, and as often as I have made note of the Drum Major Academy world and recorded conversations with veterans of both those programs during which they have gone on for a bit about them, nope, those are not by any stretch of the imagination the only outfits you should be forced to hear about on this program. So, in the next few weeks, since the next few months happen to contain quite a few anniversaries of curious and wonderful events related to my experience with all of those other bands, but even if that weren't going to be the case, you will hear stories about them. Hopefully, some of those stories may come straight from the horses' mouths, so to speak. Because also, go Blue Hens, go Spartans, go Blue Devils, and go Wildcats and Rams and Purple Panthers and Tiger Pride. Go! Except, please do stay with me as I put the finishing touches on this episode after this one last break. To wrap up this week, let's take the CODA. For the CODA this week, 2 episodes ago, in this segment, I invited you, and any listeners who knew him, to toss me a story or two about the late George N. Parks, so that hopefully I can assemble a segment full of them. That invitation is still open, and will be for the next couple of weeks, since I'm aiming to include that segment on the episode that drops on September 16th. What were the odds of that coincidence? Anyway, very briefly, let me see if I can inspire you with a very quick story of my own. It was during a rehearsal in late September, probably, of my freshman year, marching with UMass, in the year of our Lord 1984. Since the beginning of my freshman year band camp to that point, Mr. Parks had been famously very bearded. At that time, it was sort of an Abe Lincoln-style beard, no mustache, just the beard, and it wasn't lengthy but possessed a certain volume. How to describe it in current pop culture terms? Think about 80% of Jason Kelsey, minus the mustache. Before rehearsal began, we noticed that something was missing from Mr. Parks. After rehearsal began, well, it was not a great rehearsal. Not the usual energy, not the usual competence in a lot of ways. We were learning new drills, so we weren't spending much time emoting, just absorbing. And at one moment, probably about 2/3 of the way to dinner, Mr. Parks had had enough of our flabbiness. From his perch atop the practice field's viewing tower, a somewhat precariously constructed set of scaffolding, through the little Radio Shack megaphone that he always carried, at least before the advent of wireless PA technology, came this admonition. "Hey gang, you don't seem focused, you don't seem enthusiastic, you seem tired. And you know what? I don't care. Here's the deal. This morning, I shaved my beard off because it got in the way." And then he pointed toward all of us on the field. "You're next." We had a much better rehearsal after that. He, of course, was speaking in jest. I think. I'm still not exactly sure. Starred thought, do what works. That's BandWagon for this week. Thanks as always for downloading and listening. BandWagon was written, researched, and produced by your humble host. Musical interludes were produced by Hammerton Media, from source material largely by John Philip Sousa. You can listen to more episodes at our website, heyband.podbean.com. Please give me feedback. Let me know what you like, what you think might change. You can do that using our email address, heybandwagon@yahoo.com. Or leave us a 90-second voice message by going to speakpipe.com/heybandwagon. Be aware that we do reserve the right to include your message on the podcast unless you say otherwise. Those contact links and links to our news items, conversation topics, and my interview guest, MAUREEN CONNOR, can be found in our show notes. Please share the show on social media, and thank you for that. If you enjoy this podcast, get someone else to listen as well. Word of mouth is the best recruiting tool. And to keep up with us every week, subscribe to BandWagon on the Podbean app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever fine podcasts are sold. And please rate and review. It really helps other people to find the show. For now, take care, stay in touch, stay in tune, and we'll do this all again next week. I'm Rob Hammerton, and remember, put your name on your garment bag.